Hey guys, we are going live to talk about the Darlie Routier case. I'm getting, here we go. Is now with us. Hi.
Hey girl, hey.
Hey,
How are you?
I'm good. How are you today?
Good. I love you in green. That's pretty.
Oh, well, thank you. I have like a little bit of a filter on, I'm not gonna lie.
I need a filter. I didn't even think to look for a filter. That's okay. You get the full dose of this.
I was gonna say, I'm in my pajamas today. We're having like family day. My dad's here and like some of my family's over. So we are gonna end at the hour just because I know both of us have family
Perfect.
stuff going on.
Yes.
So I think we
Yes.
should just go ahead and jump right in. So anybody that hasn't watched us do our live, this is Danelle and it's Darlie Routier's baby sister. Why don't you just tell us a little bit? Yeah, just tell us a little bit about Darlie and her case. And today we're going to talk about her arrest to trial or see how far we get.
Perfect.
Okay.
Yes. Um so I'm baby sister. I was sister number 3. I was 13 when all this happened with Darlie. So I got a full 13 years of Darlie on the outside, and then the state of Texas took her from me. And we have been fighting as a family ever since. So it was just it was a beautiful 13 years. We had a great family life. You know, we all have struggles. I'm not going to lie, nothing was ever perfect, but we had a really good, strong family connection, and we had a good family unit, and everything we did together. So it was really awful whenever this unfolded and Darlie was taken from us, because she really was kind of the center of our family unit, and that really
You guys
was
did like
difficult.
a lot of events at her house.
Yes, everything was at her house or coordinated by Darlie. Like, she planned all my birthday parties, and if we had something going on, Darlie was helping do all of it. So it was really hard to not have her at every event after that. That was probably the hardest part, because, you know, anytime you lose a family member, nothing ever feels the same again.
Right.
And that's kind of how it was for us. Not only had we lost the boys and we lost that extension, that branch of the family tree, but then they stole Darlie from me too. And I do say stole Darlie because they just like plucked her up out of my life and locked her away. And we had no control or no say. And it was shocking at that age to know that they could do that and we couldn't do anything about it.
Right. And I think that's really the overarching theme as to why we're talking about this. It's not just Darlie that's been through this. This is a systematic problem within America's legal system.
Yes, it's rough. And it is every state, every community, every aspect of everybody's life can be and will be affected by this at some point, whether you know somebody that is wrongfully convicted and or accused, or whether you know somebody that knows somebody, or it's going to affect you in some form or fashion.
Or you just watch
in some
a documentary where it just hits your heart and you think, oh my gosh. I mean, that's how I do want to give a shout out to Kerry Max Cook. He's kind of become a friend of mine. He was exonerated out of the state of Texas off of death row. He served 22 years on death row, and he's been out of prison for 8.
Amazing speaker.
And he has a book called Justice. I'll post it. I was about to say Media Tried Justice Denied. No, wrong book. That's Darlie. Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
I just bought his book. I haven't got it yet in the mail, but I just bought it like last week or week before last. So I'm excited to read it. I know he's a very good speaker because he is so authentic, and he does really get kind of raw whenever he speaks about everything.
He does not beat around the bush. He tells you exactly what's up. And he tells you some things that are horrific that happened to him. And Texas's death row is one of the most deadly death rows to sit on, not just because of some of the criminals that are on, especially on the men's side. The women's side is, I feel like, slightly different. Yeah, I mean, just brutal over there. And he said, I mean, every other day they were taking people to be executed, you know, in that time that he served. And 30 years ago, you know.
Imagine how that would feel knowing you're next.
Exactly.
Just watching somebody walk by.
Just like watching.
I can't even imagine the terror.
No.
Yeah. Awful. Awful. I had somebody ask me how that they'd been following the case for a long time. They wanted to know how Darlie was doing. Darlie is doing good right now. We are patiently waiting. The Innocence Project and the Dallas County Conviction Integrity Unit is working on her case. So I fully expect that she will be exonerated sometime soon. We just don't have any kind of deadline. So
Yeah.
She wants to
talk about Vanessa and the Innocence Project. We'll probably get into that in a later episode. Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say we could do a whole nother episode on that.
Yeah, we should. Okay, so
we have somebody. Hold on one second. We've got somebody in the comments, Miss Tara Smith. Thank you for your comment. I appreciate you coming here. She's not guilty. The comment says she's never getting out, honey. She's guilty. Tara, usually speaking, the Innocence Project and the Dallas County Conviction Integrity Unit don't take on cases of people that are guilty, typically speaking. And I don't want this to sound condescending at all, but both the Innocence Project and the Dallas County Conviction Integrity Unit both have actively started taking her case, working it, knowing because there is a very, very real possibility that she is innocent and she very much could be out before the end of the 2024 year. So thanks for coming. Y'all's comments are motivation for us to keep fighting.
And the thing is that she deserves, just like everybody else, to have her appeal process, you know? I mean, that is part of our legal system. Yes, and so whether you think she's guilty or not, the IP absolutely takes on cases of guilty people. Yes. We'll get into a whole episode about the Innocence Project. Yeah. So today, let's just start off where we left off last time. So last time we talked about the crime, and actually, if you caught my live last night, me and Arabia, she's in the chat now. She's watching. We talked somewhat about the crime. In our next episode, we're kind of gonna cover the same thing that me and you are, but she has an opposing opinion, and we're really trying to make a safe, kind space for people to discuss this. If you think she's guilty, tell us why. And we might be able to debunk some myths. There's been a lot of stuff in the media that's been repeated, that's not true, that's kind of thought of as fact in the case, that's not necessarily true. So I quickly want to, and you can jump in. So the way somebody gets arrested when you're working on a capital case like this is a grand jury does the indictment. Hey, Arabia. So, what that means is there is a group of people who serve for like a year or and once a month or at some point they go in and they look at every docket, say that month that's come in, and they sit in a room and it's just a secretive group of people. Their identities are kept under wrap. And yes, Belubi, will you go moderate Danelle's comments?
I don't know if I can. Let me see if I can do that.
All right, I'll keep talking while you try. So this group of people, the grand jury, and they are elected just like a jury member is. You're called to be a part of the grand jury. There's no docket. The state presents a PCA to them. What's a PCA? So basically they go... Yeah. What, Danelle?
I said, are you asking me what a PCA is?
Yeah, do you know what that means? Probable cause affidavit.
I don't.
So they give them probable cause affidavit. So basically a document stating why they think this person is guilty and if they believe an arrest warrant should be issued to that person. Because we've all heard that kind of like a police can only hold you for 72 hours until they have enough proof to hold you, and that's that would be called your habeas corpus rights. They have to have a reason to hold you. So the grand jury goes through a PCA or a probable cause affidavit, and they state, yes, I think there's probable cause for Darlie to be arrested for this crime. And part of that, we don't know what was in that PCA, that affidavit. We don't know what was in there. Was it the blonde hair on the screen that we didn't know was Darlie's yet? Was it just...
I will tell you that we were told by the people involved in her case that she was indicted on the hair in the screen, which had not been DNA tested yet, and the fiber on the bread knife. And then what they would have also probably used the silly string, and then they would have tried to point out whatever inconsistencies they felt she had in her statement. But the evidence itself that she was indicted using was the fiber on the knife and the hair, and that came from her legal team. That was what she was indicted on. That was all they had at that time. Nothing else had been processed or had been resulted by that point.
All right, somebody in my comments is saying that's not accurate. So tell us what you think.
There is no transcript. There is no transcript of that. They don't do a transcript of grand jury indictments. That came from our legal team. That is what the legal team told us that was available at the time when Darlie was arrested. That's what was available when she was indicted. That's all they had. They did not have anything else. So to assume that she was indicted on something else is absolute fabrication.
And Arabia just said, and that makes sense what Danelle is saying, because probable cause just proves they've collected what's quote unquote evidence. Because they don't have time to go test it before they do an arrest warrant if they believe that you're guilty. Right? Grand jury hearings are not public record. That's why there are no transcripts. Okay. Exactly. So let's kind of move past that. And if we get some more, you guys still feel free to comment, and we'll pull questions. But so the grand jury basically indicted her, said we believe that there's probable cause for her arrest warrant. So her indictment was handed down on June 18th, and that day they signed her arrest warrant. And they called Darlie and Darren, her husband, in for questioning that day, but they already knew that they were going to arrest Darlie. However, Darlie and Darren went in just thinking, we're just
knew we were going to ask questions. Yeah. And Darlie had participated and answered all their questions. They were always willing to do interviews with the police. They had done several at that point. They were helping. They were cooperating. Whatever the police asked of them, they did. And Darlie and Darren both. None of us had any idea that they were even remotely looking at Darlie. Like, that never even crossed our mind. Because
your mom found out on the news. Weren't you with your mom when you guys saw it on the news?
Yes.
And you guys had no idea?
No idea. So
She's never been back home one day since they took her that afternoon or that evening. You have never seen her, touched her really again.
Exactly. We were in the living room. My mom was in the kitchen. I think she might have been washing up dinner or something. Darlie and Darren had just left and had gone to the police station maybe a couple hours before, maybe 2 hours before. And the next thing I really remember specifically, I think I was working on a craft, or I was doing a paint by number or something. I was sitting in the kitchen, in the living room.
You were about 12. You were 12.
I was 13.
13, okay.
Yep. So I would turn 14 that October, but I wasn't quite 14 yet. So I was doing something in the living room, watching TV, and everybody had the TVs on, and that was just part of it back then. And the news came on, 5 o'clock news. They actually might have broken in through the regular broadcasting, to be honest. They may have broken in and said, there's been an arrest in the double homicide in Rowlette of 2 boys. And then it went into the rest of it. And, it was shocking. Like, at that point, whenever we heard there's been an arrest, we immediately got up and, we're standing right there at the TV. Like, how did they not call us on this? Why didn't they tell us they had the person that did this? And then they show them with Darlie. And actually, if I remember correctly, my mother got a tip from one of the reporters from the Dallas Morning News. He called my mother maybe minutes before it aired and said, hey, your daughter's been arrested. And my mom immediately said, you're lying, and hung up. And then it came on the news, and it was, I was in complete shock because they say they've made an arrest, and then they show Darlie in handcuffs walking out of the police department into the jail. And the Dallas County Lou Sterrett, which is terrifying. If you've never been to Lou Sterrett jail in Dallas County, it is so overwhelming and scary. Very scary.
Area. And so, unfortunately, friends I went to high school and stuff with have, served time there now that we were all older, and I've heard terrible things about Lou Sterrett.
It's really scary.
Something in the comments.
It was.
Go ahead.
What'd you say?
Oh, I just said in the comments, Darlie became a suspect over 2 weeks of investigation as they eliminated Darren because the scene didn't match her story of an intruder. Is that why she was suspected, you believe?
You'll have to say that again. What was the first part?
So Darlie became a suspect over 2 weeks of the investigation as they eliminated Darren. The scene wasn't matching her story of an intruder. Is that why she was suspected?
Well, I will say this about that. Darlie was the only thing Darlie was able to give them initially was that a man had broken in. She remembered seeing him leaving the scene. He was wearing black clothes. She didn't get to see his face. He had longer hair in the back and he had a baseball cap on. That was all that she could remember from the situation. And so that was all they gave. That was all she could give them. They spoke to her again. That was at the scene. They spoke to her again at the hospital. About 5:15, she said the same thing. It was immediately after she'd come out of surgery. She might have been out of surgery 20 minutes. They came up and saw her. She had just gotten some pain medication. She gave them the same information, same matching description. And then they didn't have anything else from her for 2 days. She didn't give them a written statement until June 8th of 96. The crime happened early morning hours of June 6th of 96. So they basically investigated and worked that whole crime scene without having any of Darlie's information. They didn't have really a good statement from her, only the description of the guy, and that they came through that laundry room door and that they exited through that laundry room door and that they dropped a knife when they left. That was all she knew. So when they worked this crime, James Cron comes in that morning, and within 30 minutes of reviewing the crime scene, he says, "There's no intruder here." So those policemen, the investigators, the crime scene technicians, worked that entire crime with the suggested thought that Darlie was responsible. The only thing that they ever did to rule Darren out was Darlie said it wasn't him, and they talked to him at the hospital, but it was a very short amount of time that they talked to him. They didn't verify or validate anything having to do with Darren, and I do not think Darren is involved at all. But they did not look at anybody else. And to say that they looked at Darren is kind of a jump because they knew where he was. He was upstairs and Darlie said it wasn't him. So that was all they needed. That was all they needed to rule Darren out. But nothing else Darlie said they would put any weight on at all. And her story never changed. There's a lot of conflict about whether or not she wet towels or not. But she didn't really put the details of what happened after the cops showed up. So she didn't give every step after, when she calls 911, then everything is recorded on the 911 call. So it's hard to, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to say, well, then I went to the sink and I grabbed 6 towels. 2 of them were green and 1 of them was white. And then I wet 2 of those towels and gave them to Darren for Devin. And then I came back to the sink and I grabbed 2 more. She didn't do that because that wasn't relevant to the crime. And she didn't know that she needed to defend her every step. She just gave them the basic details that she remembered, and that was it. And because she didn't include life-saving measures that she performed, people tend to go back on that and act as if she was responsible for it and changed her story and did this and did that. And that's really not the case. It's a stretch.
Remember that when you've been through a chaotic, traumatic event like that, sometimes your memory does not, we just talked about that in our last episode of our podcast, Kitchen Table Research. There is traumatic amnesia, like that. A lot of times people can't point out, and a lot of times people misidentify witnesses. There have been whole cases that have been based on eyewitness testimony, and we know how bad it is. So I feel like they put a lot of weight into her not being able to describe him.
It is, if you read everybody's statement that was at that scene, every single person that wrote a statement, it's all different. And that's realistic because everybody sees things through their own lens. You know, they have different life experiences and different understandings of what's going on and different personalities and different outlooks. And that's expected. But it was unfortunate that because all those other people told the stories differently, that almost made it look like Darlie was changing her story. But it was those people retelling what they remembered, not retelling Darlie's story. And it really kind of got twisted around that Darlie had all these inconsistencies, but she really didn't have inconsistencies. Did she have some things that kind of developed through her memory kind of coming to about picking up the knife and different things like that? Nothing changed though. There was things added, like as she remembered them.
Right.
But the story never changed.
On the couch with an intruder. And then she says that he's sitting on top of her. Then she says she fought with him at the end of the bar. Then she says that, Damon woke her up. And I think that's the inconsistencies that people speak of. But what if all that stuff did happen and intruder did, try to unalive her, and her memory just mixed the entire chaotic scene into one, and then like you said, you do have dreams about it and you're trying to figure it out in your brain. And a lot of people have said, she wrote letters from jails, saying, I know who did it. It's this person. But, I just think Darlie thought and gave the state more credence and thought they were really looking for the actual intruder when they really were not.
100%. That is correct. And she never said to anybody that she was fighting the intruder at the bar. That came from Officer Waddell. I don't know what part of the story he got that from, because Darlie and his conversation is all captured on the 911 call. And she doesn't ever say, I fought with the intruder at the end of the bar. Or the end of the island. That never was part of the conversation. He kind of put that together himself, from what he remembered from his conversation with her. That was how he interpreted it. But Darlie's story has consistently,
or they're wrong, but everybody perceives things differently. Waddell, and this is something me and Arabia talked about yesterday, when Waddell responds to that call, he's responding to an unknown medical emergency at 2:30 in the morning. Right. So to me, you're thinking, somebody probably had a heart attack in the middle of the night. He didn't know he was walking on a crime scene. You know what I mean?
I don't know exactly what he heard when they dispatched the 911 call. I don't know exactly what the words were. I know that when they released it, I think she had said, the dispatcher had said it's a stabbing at 5801 Eagle Drive. But who knows what he heard? And I'm 100% sure he was not thinking this is a stabbing of two little boys and a mama, because that doesn't happen in Rowlette. It's probably a gang fight or a drug deal gone wrong. That's probably what he's thinking. Right, exactly. Not this massive murder.
That's what we talked about. So Arabia said that we're going to talk about some red fluid splatter on one of our next calls. So we'll get into that. And then Christy, who did work at the Kerr County Jail, she said Kerr County was nice, but she said jail isn't supposed to be a picnic. I get that. Somebody said, how did she not wake up?
Okay, it's a good question. And I hear that quite a bit. I 100% do not believe that Darlie was asleep the entire event. But you do have to know that a stabbing, average amount of time for a stabbing is 23 seconds. So for you to put that into perspective, this guy could have theoretically, there was no broken glass. There was no forced entry. The window was unlocked. So it was just raised. The window screen was cut. He entered without making any sound. Opens the back door, which was unlocked, makes no sound. Walks through the kitchen, makes no sound. When he gets there to the boys, if he attacked the boys first, if you believe Mr. Bevel, then he attacked Devin first. then attacks Darlie, and then attacks Damon. And in that series of events, it could have taken him a minute. That's it, to stab all three.
Two separate events, and Damon's believed to be stabbed in two separate events. And yeah, somebody said, why didn't the cop do anything to help?
There is absolutely no scientific evidence to support Damon being attacked in two separate events. That was the state's attempt at making their timeline fit the newly developed evidence that Tom Bevel sprung on them last minute. He's notorious for that. He changes his testimony kind of mid-swing, and that is a huge red flag. If your evidence is changing before you get to the stand and the prosecution doesn't even know it, that's a huge red flag. And we have seen that documented in other cases for Tom Bevel, where he will have this report and he tells the experts from the opposing team, this is what I think happened, this is what I'm going to say, this is my stance. And then he gets to trial and he has a completely different stance. And that is a really bad situation, because your defense team has prepared information based on what his theory was originally. And then he goes and changes his theory, and the evidence, did the evidence evolve? Did the evidence change? No, the evidence is still the same, but he's changed how he's viewing it. And that's really, really bad for defense, and he's notorious for that.
Well,
but no.
Yeah.
To answer that, I do not think Darlie slept through the entire thing. I think that it was just a really quick attack. I also think that she very well could have been either subdued from asphyxia, the hand over the mouth. That would explain why the inside of her lips were all tore up and looked like hamburger meat. Her mouth was so sore. Yes. She had scratches right under her chin. She had one on her cheek. She had some bruising. She had bruising on her neck too, which, could she have had some kind of strangulation? I don't know. There wasn't a ligature, but
an arm right here on her. But we've talked about this several times. The pictures are so hard to tell what's a shadow and what's photography at the time, and them taking it under the fluorescent lights in the hospital with all the shadow casting and stuff makes it really hard to. So we kind of have some differing opinions here in the comments. Bevel's been wrong in many cases. Yes, he has. He's had several cases overturned. And Arabia, yeah, we'll get into the pattern. Someone asked how come Darren didn't hear anything? It was
it was a really fast attack. I mean, a knife attack is really fast and it's completely silent. And I don't know if you guys have ever been hit in the chest with something or had any kind of impact to your chest where you get your breath knocked out of you. It takes you just a minute to kind of recover and catch your breath so that you can speak again.
Right.
Well, when you are hit with a knife in your chest, you don't get a minute to recover, and it may have legitimately taken Devin's breath away initially, and he never was able to regain his breath because he bled out pretty fast. Same with Damon. I don't think Damon was even awake when this happened. Obviously, he was laying down on his belly. His stab wounds were on his back, and so he never even saw it coming. When he did stand up and push on Darlie's shoulder, then she remembers coming to in a panic, and she felt very scared, like very panicky, but she didn't know really what was going on. She remembers seeing a figure leaving the living room and going through the kitchen. At that time, she gets up and kind of follows the guy, because she still does, like, her brain is not processing what's going on. She has no idea that this man has just attacked her. She doesn't even know if this is real or is this a dream. She follows as he leaves. She sees him go through the laundry room door and he drops the knife. As she gets about halfway through the kitchen, she can see the knife on the floor. She picks up the knife out of instinct and puts it on the bar. But I do not think that she was asleep through the entire process. I think she was subdued, or it just happened really fast. And as she's coming to, she's not able to really formulate, like her brain's not really functioning at full speed at that point.
No, absolutely. I mean, even just getting woken up in the middle of the night, you're not even fully functioning. It takes you a few seconds. And I think our theory about it being a fast and quick attack is that most of the time, knife attacks are quick and fast. They get in, they do the attack, and then they leave. So we're just saying that based on previous other crimes that are similar to this. Of course, none of us were there. We don't know, and like that's part of this case. There are some things that people will just never know. Like, we don't know what Darren and Darlie talked about that night. Darlie says they talked about this, and Darren says they talked about this, but really, we weren't there. And like you said, Darlie's perception of that conversation might have gone totally different than what Darren got out of that conversation. Okay, so she said she followed. She said she followed and went into the utility room after the man, but no blood pattern supports that. Well, there is low velocity blood splatter all the way to the laundry room, and then actually, if you look in the laundry room, she says when she bent over to pick up the weapon, that's when she noticed that she was bleeding from the neck because it dropped blood onto the floor. Is that my understanding? You're kind of nodding your head, like maybe no.
No, she realized that she was bleeding whenever she walked past the mirror in the kitchen, which is directly across from the sink, and she saw it. She felt the warm on her, but she didn't feel the actual knife attack. But it was when she was towards the sink is when she realized she had been cut. When she turned the light switch on, she sees there's blood. She doesn't really know what's going on. And then she sees herself in the reflection of the mirror, and she said, this right here was like a gaping wound. So it was pretty alarming in itself to see that she's got this gaping wound across her neck, and she's able to see that the boys are laying on the ground. Damon had kind of followed her. She tells him, to stay where he's at, not to come into the kitchen, because she doesn't know if that guy has left the garage or not. She didn't even know how he got in.
Why didn't she just grab Damon and pick up her babies?
She didn't have the capability to. She had a stab wound on her right arm, and why I don't.
Does have a stab wound on her chest right here. Some people think that it's part of but it's a separate wound. So she was struck in the chest.
Yeah, she did have a stab wound on her left chest area. There is some DeMaio says that could have been a continuation of that stab wound, but DeMaio, his interpretation of this wound is that it really was a stab wound, not a slash. Like it wasn't, the knife wasn't laid flat against her neck and sliced. It was, in fact, an attempted stab wound, and Darlie was able to kind of defend his arm off enough that once it touched, it didn't go as far in as he would have wanted it to, and then it was a
also states that if you're able to, your body will automatically pull you away from that, weapon. So we've got lots of questions coming in. We might not get to our timeline today, but that's fine because we're here to answer questions, you guys. So people say most of the time people bring their own weapons. It's really hit and miss. There's a lot of people that take weapons from inside the house. So I feel like that's a moot point. We know that Richard Ramirez did that. We know that the Golden State Killer did that. We knew that the Axeman of New Orleans did that. We know that the Villisca axe murderer did that. They all took weapons from inside the home, because if you are somebody that is leaving a crime scene and the police pull you over and you have that weapon on you, not only bringing your own weapon to the scene gives more information to the police about who you are, first of all. Second of all, it ties you somehow and can bring contamination. Third, every person has knives in their kitchen.
Yes. And a lot of crime of opportunity.
It's yes. Okay.
Yeah, a lot.
The other chat, this is directly at you, Danelle. How do you know Darren wasn't involved? Why do you believe that?
So my opinion is based on my personal experience with Darren, and I've known him from the time I was 3 years old. I've known him, and he was nothing but kind. He was never violent. He was never mean. He was really proud of Darlie and the boys. He loved his family. There was never any kind of behavior that would indicate he was a violent person or intending to hurt somebody. With this kind of a behavior, you would expect to see some kind of violence in their past. And Darren had none. Now, do I think that he could have set up some kind of, or spoken about setting up a robbery? Absolutely, it could have happened. I don't know. And it makes a lot of sense that that could have possibly been a thing. Like, did he talk about it to somebody at his shop or at the neighbor's shop? And yes, the wrong person overheard it and took it upon themselves to hit the house themselves and not return any of the things. I don't know. I mean, that would also kind of go to support the fact that this was a crime of opportunity. Somebody broke in to rob their house, not thinking they needed a weapon, because Darlie and Darren were supposed to be traveling in the next couple weeks and the house should have been empty. So did this person get just the wrong date? Like, Darren's car wasn't there. Darlie's car wasn't parked in the same spot it normally is. So it definitely could have looked as if nobody was there. Did that person think that nobody was there and break in and just grab a knife on the counter as an opportunity? Now they see that Darlie's laying on the couch. They can see her blonde hair from where the TV's shining in on the couch.
Right.
Now they've shifted their motive from being a robbery. Well, now they know Darlie's beautiful, because if they know Darren, they know Darlie. Then it becomes a crime of opportunity, and I'm just going to rape her, or whatever that might have been in their head. And unfortunately, Devin and Damon were laying on the floor and were just collateral damage. Did Devin get stepped on? Did he get kicked? Possibly. He did have a bruise on his ear, and that would have not been something they expected to see on the floor, or two little boys. So it's definitely something that kind of supports that theory that it was a robbery gone bad or a sexual assault gone bad.
And some people say there were two weapons. You know, I believe that it was the same weapon used on both boys, but in my opinion, I do think he sliced the screen with his own pocket knife. But you're not going to go carry out a homicide or a murder with a pocket knife. I mean, most men carry pocket knives. We talked about this a little bit yesterday. There was deer hair found around the screen area. There were no deer. You guys were not hunters. No one in your family said no one had any kind of taxidermy, deer rugs, deer skin, anything like that. But again, it's like
Hold on one second.
Yeah, you're right. But you know, Sorry. Again, like me and Arabia said yesterday, it's one of those things where you're not ever going to find a sterile crime scene. So I mean, there's deer in the Rowlette area. So again, it just becomes something that it's like, does it belong to the crime scene, or is it, you know? So there are many theories behind, 1 to 2 intruders. I know Rich and Mystery Maverick have talked a lot about that. If you guys want to go check that out, go look at Rich Prater, just Prater on YouTube. Then somebody said Adrenaline would have to pick up her kids. Again, I feel like we don't know. I mean, we don't know what that's.
Okay, here's what I want to say about that. It is really easy to put yourself theoretically in that position and assume that you would do all these things. But in real life, when you're in a stressful situation, especially something like this, I mean, her children are dying at her feet. She can see that this is a terrible situation, and it's super traumatic, not to mention the fact that she is bleeding herself and she sees the severity of her boy's wounds. She doesn't know the severity of her wounds. She is assuming that she's going to die.
Yeah.
Yes. And the nurse, I also want to say this, I've not made this comment before, but the nurse that called my mother and told my mother that Darlie had been attacked and that the boys were dead, told my mother Darlie is probably going to die too. So for a well-trained nurse that saw Darlie and her injuries in their rarest form before anybody else got to her, there was no coverage of the wounds at all, and Karen Neal saw her in that state. Karen told my mom she thought she was going to die too. So in your brain, you have to assume at that point that that nurse was concerned about her wounds enough to think that they were going to kill Darlie. So that implies that they were pretty raw, pretty nasty, pretty ugly, and intimidating wounds. And Darlie definitely kind of had
about his was a neighbor of theirs that Darren went to get, and she came over. Now they didn't let her inside the house, but Darlie, I believe, was already sitting on the porch at that point because one of the EMTs was looking at her neck.
Yes.
and getting ready to load her into the ambulance right after Damon. We did talk about this last night. They picked him up and put him in an ambulance, although we believe he was unalive before he probably ever even reached that ambulance. But they did try. So to get blood pattern to all these quote unquote stage places, but no pattern behind the man is what somebody said is suspected. Arabia. They can't, hold on. Then she said they can't provide one, let alone exiting out the window, leaving zero evidence. And see, I disagree with that because we know there was a drop of blood in the garage. That was collected by Catherine Long. Cron told her not to collect it. She either didn't get the message or Lynch told her to collect it anyways. But there is
it was not processed.
Well, and they said Karen Neal did not examine Darlie. No, she did not examine her as a nurse.
Okay, here's what I'm going to say. Karen Neal saw Darlie before she had her wounds repaired. Karen Neal, as a nurse, you are assessing every patient you see, especially in a medical situation, whether you're trying to or not. Your nursing skills don't just go away when you see somebody that's hurt. You're still a nurse, and that role will come first. You're always a nurse, especially in a medical situation. Was she with her stethoscope listening to Darlie's heart rate? No. Let's be real. But was she looking at her wounds and evaluating her wounds and determining if the amount of blood pouring out of Darlie's neck is enough for her to die from? Yes, she was looking at that. And yes, she was concerned that Darlie could die from her wounds. So yes, she was assessing her. She may not have been documenting it. She may have not been paid for that nursing job she did. But yes, as a nurse, you are assessing everybody you meet, especially in a medical situation.
Somebody states that if Darlie knew that Darren was setting up this thing, why wouldn't she have stated names? But Darren didn't come out with that information until much later.
Right. Yeah, I think it was.
People are talking about the bread knife. How was it left? We'll get into that on another. We'll get into more forensics as we continue the crime. Not using a pocket knife to injure or subdue someone proves the motive was murder when they grabbed the largest knife out of the block. Whenever you said his intent changed from robbery to grape, you know, then why did they pick the biggest knife? And I think that the intent, the motive was there. And I think that actually Darlie knew this person in some capacity. I also believe that that person had been in the house before and knew the layout of the house. That house was a new build, and we don't know how many people had been in and out of that house. What, they had lived in it for 3 or 4 years?
3 years.
Mm-hmm. But, you know, there's been speculation that one of the construction workers, you know, kind of became obsessed with her. And there's been some forensic analysis that I've seen. Like I said, don't necessarily agree with it, but I've seen it out there about the way the crime was committed. It shows that the person was more likely to work in the construction industry. So that's been a possibility that I've heard. All right, let's get back to some more questions.
Well, I want to say about the Darren thing. Okay. Darlie never once heard Darren discussing any insurance scams. That is not something that anybody in the family had any pre-known knowledge of. That we didn't know that was a thing. We didn't know it was going to happen. We didn't know he had been talking about it. Darlie had no clue. So if Darlie had known, she would have probably told him, absolutely not. We're not doing that. That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
I think that, so there was some sketchy people that Darren knew just because he worked beside all these different shops.
Yeah, mechanics and stuff.
Yeah, some of those fellas were not always in the up and up. And could he have been talking about an insurance scam with one of those people and one of those shady people overheard it? It's very possible, but it was not something that was talked about in front of Darlie, around Darlie, an earshot of Darlie. Darlie had no idea. If she knew for 1 second, if she had any inkling of a thought that she might know who was involved, we would have searched top to bottom inside and out, and there would not have been any stop in us until we had them figured out completely. But we did not have that information beforehand, and we didn't have that information for many years after as well.
So to follow up on that question, somebody asked, what was the life insurance policy on Darlie?
So Darlie,
do you know at the time?
Darlie had a $250,000, like that was the total value of her life insurance at the time. Devin and Damon both had a $5,000 policy. And sorry, my dog was just throwing something in the air. And then it's a toy though, it's not a chicken. And then Darren had like $750,000 in life insurance. So if you're looking at it from a Darlie is guilty standpoint, it would have been Darren. He would have been the target if it was a monetary thing, because he was worth the most money, and he also spent the most money. Like, he was the big spender in the family, not Darlie. So that would have fixed two problems. You're taking out the big spender, and you're getting a bigger payout. But that was never the motive. There was never any kind of desire for anybody to cash in on a life insurance policy. That was never the case. So,
and somebody said the severity of her wounds just show how much blood should have been in the path if she was following the intruder. There is a lot of blood, in my opinion, though.
Oh yeah, that house was covered in blood, and that was something that the paramedics also mentioned, was that there was blood everywhere. And in every one of their statements, they annotate, or they specifically make reference to the amount of blood that was everywhere. So it was definitely a messy crime scene. It was definitely a lot for those paramedics to take in and kind of,
I think some of those paramedics, and I don't know if this is in testimony or hearsay or what, but I heard that a couple of those police officers and EMTs did, court or like therapy through the police station because of how bad. But the pattern of hers don't match the path of following the intruder. Well, let's do BPA, blood splatter. Let's do that another day, because we've got about 10 or 15 minutes left on this live. So I think we should just finish asking up any questions, and then next time we'll kind of move on for what we had planned today, which was so she was arrested on June 18th, which was 2 weeks. So the crime happened on the morning of June 6th. She got out of the hospital June 8th. What day was the services for the boys? And the video?
The viewing was the 8th. They actually made Darlie to the viewing.
Yes, okay, remember that.
And I'm assuming that the actual funeral services were the next day, but I can't remember for certain.
I believe they were the next Saturday, and then I think they didn't, in between them like putting the boys, this sounds bad, but putting the boys in their caskets and then doing the graveside service to actually bury them, was there time in between there? Did you guys go straight from the service to the memorial? Do you remember?
We went straight from the
service.
Are you talking about the memorial for Devin's birthday?
Yes.
That was several days later.
Okay, that's what I thought. So you guys went to the gravesite and did the gravesite a few days after the funeral service. So just so everybody knows, I'm a mortician. So normally, and most people have been to funerals, but just to kind of spell it out for you, normally when somebody passes away and they want to be like buried and not, cremated or something else, but they want to be buried, we get them ready, put them in their casket. We have a viewing. The family comes and does the thing, and then the next day there's normally a service of some sort at the church chapel or at the funeral home, whatever the family decides. And then sometimes the family decides to go straight from the service straight to the memorial, and sometimes they'll wait like a week. And that's fine because the bodies are embalmed, and so you can wait to inter them. So she's out of the hospital June 8th. at least the wake or whatever you want to call it that night. Saturday morning was the service. And then a few days later, you guys went and did the memorial service actually at the grave site. And that is where the silly string video plays. Then I think we should just end this with the silly string, because I think that'll give us a really good jumping off point to get to next time. So let me just give you my thoughts about the silly string from a funeral perspective. I've been to tons of funerals, tons of grave sites. I've had people bring liquor, pour liquor out. I've had people shoot fireworks with ashes in them. I've had people mix ashes and put them into tattoos. We have jewelry made out of ashes. People play all kinds of different music. I've heard Rob Zombie at a funeral. I've heard like the Deftones and Metallica, especially for people that love to like ride bikes and, you know, we're big motorcycle, you know, not like a bicycler, but like motor, you know. You know, and that was their life, and that was how they want to be remembered and buried. And so to me, I don't think that it was inappropriate in any way from my perspective, but I understand how the public would have viewed that. And I think if actually that would have happened today, because we've come kind of further in our acceptance and maybe handling death, you know what I mean? Or more things being acceptable. Like we know cremations are now more popular than they used to be. It's become less of a religious tradition and more about that person's life, just as like history has gone on. So like I said, I've seen all kinds of, I mean, I've seen full-fledged parties happen. And so to me, it doesn't seem inappropriate, the silly string video, and I would have put no weight into that, besides the fact that Darlie stated that the motive was for other kids to feel comfortable and for them to be able to say bye to the boys. Yeah, Olivia said the character assassination is totally irrelevant. Agreed. So
the silly string video has absolutely nothing to do with the crime itself, but it really did impact Darlie's outcome, unfortunately. And basically, that was all orchestrated by a 16-year-old child. My other sister, Dana, is the one that brought that silly string. And this was not at the grave site. This was, at the funeral. This was at a memorial for the boys. This was directed at the boys. It was for the boys. And the silly string came in as an afterthought from the 16-year-old sister, whom had just promised Devin that she would have silly string at his birthday party because she didn't allow him to have silly string when she was going to get married. And because that would have stained her white wedding dress. So she promised that they would have silly string at his birthday party or in the future. So since we weren't going to get to have any more fun times with the boys, this was it. That was all she had left. So she did what she thought was appropriate. And this is a 16-year-old. Darlie Lynn allowed it because at that point we were just trying to survive. We didn't know what was right and what was wrong. And for anybody in my comments to say no mother would do that, put yourself in your own little glass house and shut your curtains, because in real life you don't know what you would do. You don't know what was in her head or how she's going to process that grief. We had just been at a graveside prayer service.
Right.
We had spent hours crying, and we were cried out at that point. It's 8 days later. Devin had been killed and taken from us right before his birthday. We had been hysterically crying. We have grieved.
You guys already had the birthday cake ordered and the
everything
she has the whole thing ready. Yeah,
it was already scheduled. This was directed at allowing the children to bring those toys that they had already bought for Devin. We were going to donate them to the local foster care home that was in Rowlette. That was Darlie's idea. And then Dana brought the silly string in because Dana wanted to honor them and fulfill that commitment that she had made to Devin that he could have silly string one last time. That's all it was. I also want to say about the gum smacking, Darlie had been started on some antidepressants considering what she had just gone through. And in that first couple weeks of any of those kind of medications, one of the side effects is commonly dry mouth.
Yeah.
And a lot of the times, like Darlie didn't have a bottle of water on hand, but I think my aunt actually had gum in her purse. So that's where she got the gum from. And that wasn't, like, when did chewing gum make you guilty? And there
Well,
was
and it's
no
like
ban.
all of you guys also celebrated right along with her. You know, Dana sprayed the silly string. I think maybe you did.
Yeah, I
I
did.
don't think Darren did. I think he kind of let you girls kind of
Yeah,
have your bonding sister moment. So does that make you guilty of killing the boys
exactly.
because you sprayed silly string?
Exactly. And if you ask some of those people that are so absolutely set on the fact that she is a psychotic killer, they're going to tell you that we are also guilty because we support her. But
Right.
I don't understand the thought process behind that, and that's not realistic because there's not any reason why every single person watching this wouldn't support their family if their family was wrongfully convicted.
And you
And
guys
no
have
matter
to remember that
what
this is Danelle's truth. This is
yes.
her story. Danelle's not on trial, you guys.
And
You
no
know,
matter what anybody
Danelle is
thinks,
supporting her family.
yes, and I 100% with all my heart and soul, without any shadow of a doubt, think that Darlie is innocent. And I am going to do everything in my power to support an innocent person that was wrongfully convicted, as every single one of you should do as well. Never would I tell my child to sit down and allow something wrong to continue. I would tell them to stand up and fight with it and use your whole chest. Fight with everything in you if something is being done wrong to somebody you love, because we don't let somebody go down for no reason. Like,
Right.
we're going to support and we're going to fight until the right thing is done. That's always been how I've raised. I was never raised to be quiet and let things just go.
You
If
know,
it's
you
wrong,
guys have a very strong family of women, definitely. I mean, people that know your mom know that she can be a force to be reckoned with. And she's made it very clear. And honestly, in my heart, I believe 100% that Darlie's innocent. And I think that's really a great way for me and you to talk about this. But then, you know, me and Arabia, and maybe once she gets her followers up, we can do, you know, do a panel and talk about it. But we want there to be a discussion. We're tired of hateful comments, harassment, people saying that you're lying. Like, everybody has their own theories. There, like we said, there's certain things about the case that we will never know. Like, I mean, there are cases where unless you were a fly on the wall, you didn't know everything that happened. And yeah, that's why you stick with the evidence and not with the character of Darlie. That's a very good point to make. I think that's a good point to end on. You stick with the evidence, not anything character related to Darlie as a person.
well,
Um,
I want to get out there that Greg Davis and Toby Shook never sat with Darlie and had any kind of conversations with Darlie.
and
The
those
police,
are the two prosecutors.
yes, and they developed this persona of this very mean, vile, self-centered, irrational, psychotic person. And then they took that image that they created of this person and they made that person as mean and as evil as possible to everybody that would listen, so that it was understandable or acceptable to think that this sweet little tiny blonde could potentially kill two of her own children for absolutely no reason.
And
And
today
that's
we
what
call it clickbait, but that's what the news used. Her character assassination brought in way more viewers than them being like, "Oh my gosh, you know this."
and
And
they didn't know her. It came from people that didn't know her. Anybody, I would challenge anybody here that's watching this to find somebody that really genuinely knew Darlie that didn't like her, or
right.
somebody that knew Darlie that thought she was capable of even hurting an animal, because she's not. That's not who she is. If you
Yeah,
find
Arabia said
like
definitely
that,
100% valid issues with the handling of the case. Very valid issues. And like we said, even though Arabia, she believes that Darlie is guilty, that doesn't mean that we cannot have a discussion, you guys. We want
yeah,
everybody to be kind in this space. We want to be able to talk about this. I am here to give Danelle and Darlie support. I do talk to Darlie. She's a sweetheart. Last week, after we escaped from the fires and everything, you know, I told her, hey, let me put some money in your commissary. You know what she told me? She said, Anna, you do so much for so many other people. Why don't you go treat yourself and get a pedicure or something? Instead, like, what? If you know what I mean, like, what person? And last time we did the live, she was having you put together an Instacart for one of her friends that's moving into a new home.
Yep.
She still does
very
these things. She's
she's very
generous. And she did a lot of things for a lot of people. And people have asked me, people that stood by her, or, you know, do her friends still stand by her? I said, every single person that knew her, Julia Clark, Karen Neal, up until the point she unfortunately died, Melanie Waite still goes and cleans up the boys' graves. These were all people that knew her very well. Now, we can talk about Barbara in another episode, too, because we could go into Barbara for probably an hour. And because that's very convoluted, but anybody that does, and the fact that Darren's parents and Darlie Routier, who was a lovely woman, said that she did not believe that Darlie was guilty to the day she died, I think states more than anecdotal stories. And I've read in some of the other groups that, oh, well, they had the police called on them because this and this and this. You have to remember, guys, after this happened, this family was torn apart. And Dana, I think, felt, and I don't want to step on toes, but I think she felt really guilty about the silly string incident. And she was 16, 17 at this time. That's hard being a teenager. Now your sister's been taken away. Now you feel guilty because you supplied the silly string that character assassinated her, that they took and spun into such a wicked, vile thing. And so, yeah, every family has fights. Every family has, and that's what we were talking about last night. When you look through the list of evidence, there's evidence in their house that, yeah, they had adult toys and stuff. Who cares? Who cares? Anybody's house you go through, you're gonna find shit. Everybody is an adult, and those are all legal things. She was a married woman. She had the right to do whatever she wanted.
And no infidelity. They loved each other. They had a good, healthy sex life. There was no infidelity. There was no outside relationships. There was no questionable, interactions with other genders.
Back to, I mean, what is the motive?
There is no motive. There was absolutely no motive. And there's always a motive. I don't care what anybody says. I know you don't have to prove it in the state of Texas, but there is always a reason why somebody does something, especially at this level. It's not like stealing a candy bar. You know what I mean? There's always a reason.
Right. The toys weren't used against her. No, they weren't. But I'm just stating that since I posted the evidence logs, you'll see them in there, and I'm just stating I could have redacted it, but you know what? I think that we should be telling the truth here. There's nothing to hide. Who cares?
Yeah. We've never hidden that.
Then somebody said one time I had my purse searched and they found one. How mortifying.
That would be so bad. That's like a fear, going to the airport and something in a pocket somewhere. Can you imagine? Whew.
Oh gosh, can you imagine what airports see? Well, I think on that note, it's about 7, so I know you're finishing up at your kids' games. My kiddo just came in here with a baseball bat. He's probably about to beat me up.
He's ready to go play, Mom. He wants ball.
Are you really want to go play? He wants to go blow bubbles. We're really into bubbles right now.
Oh, sweet baby.
And hide and seek. And my new parenting hack is when we play hide and seek, I have like 2 or 3 places in the house where he can't find me for a really long time, and so I get like a 30-minute nap. See, I'm like, somebody could take this and twist this around on me and be like, "You're such a bad parent." I mean, literally, on one of my other friends, or somebody that I'm friends with on TikTok, these people were mom shaming her over feeding her kid a Lunchable, telling her you're feeding your kid chemicals and you're sitting there eating sushi and you fed your kid a Lunchable. What a terrible mother. And I jumped in those comments just like you said, Danelle. If there's somebody saying, I said, you're really going to mom shame somebody over feeding their kid a freaking Lunchable? I said, get out of here. Either
that's ridiculous.
Kids, or you know, you've got maids and nannies that can cook organic, fresh farm food for your kids every day. Like, literally, the air that we breathe in is worse than what's in some of the food. Everything has chemicals in it. Everything.
Even if your kids are fed an organic diet, they're going to eat a chicken nugget from the back seat or a booger from their own nose. It does not matter. Kids are going to eat whatever they want.
That's cool.
Yeah, you can control that. And let's get real. Like, in real life, everything is not organic and clean. You're going to have to survive on a Lunchable every now and then. So what?
Exactly. So just mom shaming is just, you know, I don't like it. We all raise kids differently. I definitely feel like that played into this case with the character assassination, you know, mom shaming Darlie about what she did and didn't do and how she didn't do things. And the fact that she took pride in her own image does not mean she didn't love her kids any less. I take a lot of pride in my image. That's just who I am. It's me. It's my authentic self.
Yeah, you're allowed to do that. There's nothing wrong with being proud of your appearance or feeling good about yourself. That's a good thing.
Be a person outside of being a mom.
Yeah, what's wrong with that?
To be a woman and a wife.
Yep, there's nothing wrong with that. I think that's actually healthy.
It is healthy, and people that shame, I feel like, don't understand that. So that's, anyways, I went a little off topic there at the end, but I'm glad that Darlie's doing well. We'll be back next week, and just keep the questions coming. Why stick to evidence and testimony that connect the dot? Yeah, it's irrelevant. It's totally irrelevant. Some of the stuff that they tried to, you know, and some of these anecdotal stories that you read about Darlie, I'm like, this could be some random Smo Joe that's a 16-year-old kid behind a keyboard. We don't know these stories. I mean, come on. There's a story that I saw. Oh, one time I saw her at the grocery store. She was yelling at her boys. Yeah, I probably would be too. Like, kids are crazy at the grocery store. How many times do you see parents have to discipline their kids at the grocery store and stick them in the cart and say, sit down?
They were like a year and a half apart. They were really close together. They were just, you know, 5 and almost 7. Right. Yeah. And I will say that Darlie was not a yeller. She did not really discipline the boys. She may have like used her mom voice and corrected them, but she was not a yeller. Me, today, I for sure yelled at Kaysen and Ridge, who are 15 today and 7. I for sure yelled at them.
Happy birthday, Kaysen, by the way.
Yeah, there was a lady that was within earshot, and she turned around and looked at me, and I said, sorry. And she was like, girl, I get it.
Exactly. That's the thing. Like, if you're a mom, you get it. Like, it's, and before I was a mom, I judged moms too. Now I'm like, ooh.
Yeah. Yep. Everybody does it, I think.
So, all right. Well, this has been a great topic. I hope that if you did get a question, that it got answered. We do have somebody kind of trying to help us moderate questions so that we can get through things. And next time we'll just do the episode we planned on today. All we have is time, right?
That's right. Nothing but time.
Nothing but time.
If we did not answer your question,
I want Darlie to not have any more time. I'm ready for her to be out.
Agreed. Soon enough. We're working on it. But if you asked a question and I didn't see it, send it to me or Sully in a direct message, and we can address it either in a video or in another live.
So normally we do our lives on Sunday around 6ish. We both have families and lots of stuff going on. We missed the past couple of weeks because I had to run away from a fire.
Life-saving features.
Yeah. So, but we should, I'm available next Sunday. And then actually the Sunday after that, I'm going to be with you.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I forgot.
So maybe we'll do a little, maybe not like a live like this, but maybe we'll jump on and just say hi to everybody and just let everybody know how Darlie's doing and just kind of let everybody know what's up.
Sounds like a plan.
All
Sounds
right.
good.
I hope everybody enjoyed this. If you're not following Danelle, go follow her. Vice versa. Please post, re-like if you believe Darlie is truly innocent. Please share and get information out there. If you're on the fence, same thing. Just listen to the facts. Keep listening to our lives. All of us don't know everything all the time. We're human. We make mistakes, but let's be kind, you guys. Be kind in the comments. Be kind on TikTok, and let's keep this a respectful place where we can continue to have conversations like this.
Thank you, guys. I really appreciate it.
Darlie would want any of us fighting over this. Honestly, she wouldn't. And she says all of that's a non-factor. That's literally the word that she uses.
Yep, absolutely.
So,
absolutely.
So much love to all my fans. Thank you guys for joining us tonight. And I'll see you later, Danelle. Thank you.
Okay, see y'all later.
Okay, bye, guys. Have a good Sunday.
Bye.